Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers, Crimson Oracle here with another tutorial. This time I'm going to be showing how I do basic weathering of paints on ash waste vehicles. There's a link up here to a video where I show how I use a sponge to add layers of paint to an already weathered object to create the appearance of there having previously been paint. But if you want a chipping effect that is a little bit less obviously done with a sponge, you want to invest in a little bit of chipping fluid, which Vallejo sells in a little dropper bottle, or you could potentially get from a different brand that's just the one that my local game store happens to carry. And yeah, I think it's great. So you'll see the process I go through to weather the vehicle, and then I'm showing how to do this with standard brush-on paint. You can definitely use an airbrush. You'll get better results with an airbrush, but I'm really trying to keep things focused on stuff that, you know, people who don't have a ton of hobby supplies can do. You know, pick up one item, you know, buy a little bit of chipping fluid, and you're able to start doing this. You don't have to use an airbrush to use chipping fluid, as you will soon see. So this vehicle is actually a really fun little kind of tank thing, walker tank, that I got as part of a Patreon for the Makers Cult. They sell it on their CG Trader store, and it is a absolute beauty. I mean, this thing is delightful, and it has variants for doing, you know, like different chassis that are. This one has an open back bed, but they also have one that's like a tanker style, and then one that's an enclosed back, and you know, you have plenty of options. But I wanted this to be something that fit with the ash waste, you know, aesthetic. So I went with the open back one with the crazy walker legs. I don't know if the rules for ash waste will differentiate between a vehicle that's a walker and a crawler, since we don't have any of the detailed vehicle profiles that are supposed to be coming at some point. I'm not gonna lie, I'm feeling a little bit anxious about the fact that we just got the Sunday preview that tells us that we won't be getting Book of the Outlands once again. We're looking at now a month post launch for the Ash Waste box, and we still can't play our Ash Waste campaigns. Don't really know what GW is thinking with this. I can't fathom that this was intentional, so I'm hoping that there's just some extreme supply chain crisis that caused this, because the lack of vehicle rules makes the Ash Waste campaign that's out right now kind of useless, and I just can't imagine that they intended for their brand new box set to come out and be unable to play in campaigns because no one has any vehicles, right? Because you literally can't actually play the Ash Waste campaign that's in the book without all of the vehicle upgrades and the vehicle profiles that are in Book of the Outlands. So why would they release one without the other? It doesn't make any sense. It's like the opposite of FOMO. Fear of having a useless giant box set that you can't do anything with. But the lack of communication is starting to kind of skeeze me out a little bit. If we have to wait until the middle of summer for the vehicle rules to drop, I'm not going to be able to use them for Nova, which is in September. So what the hell, GW? Anyway, check out the Maker's Cult on CG Trader and Patreon. They're very cool. They make a lot of very fun models, and they have a high rate of output. So I never regret subscribing to them. So we're coming out of the gates with this primed brown, and we are going to come in with a pretty liberal coating of, I'm using a Vallejo metal color steel, and I am coming in and mostly trying to get the edges. You'll see that it's similar technique to dry brushing, but this is a very wet paint, so I'm not dry brushing this particular paint. And we're coming in and just kind of getting the edges, the areas where wear would actually cause the rust to flake off and the metal underneath to become re-exposed. Now we're going to come in with some pigments. I like to use pigments, but you can absolutely get away with using paints for this kind of weathering. I have a whole bunch of the Vallejo rust-colored pigments because I use them a lot. And the secret of weathering pigments is that while you probably want to buy a few different varieties when you start doing that kind of painting, they last forever. I have used these paints on like a dozen or more Necromunda tiles and various other things. Now, I like to get the bottoms of stuff too. Other people are less discerning about that. As you can see, I'm laying it on pretty thick. Now I'm going to come in with an orange to even bring it up even more. And part of the reason that I'm going so heavy with my weathering on this model is that I am actually going to be painting over a big chunk of it when I add the top paint color, and then I'll be removing paint to show the weathering underneath. So I want a lot of variety and color. And now I'm coming in, now I'm using my own version of streaking grime. Vallejo makes a perfectly fine streaking grime and I love it. But in this situation, I was out of it. And so I used some paints and some medium and some water to make a green wash that has a similar kind of feel to streaking grime. And now, of course, we're coming in with some black ink and a sponge. I find this is very important for making your weathering look kind of dirty and realistic. You need a little bit of black mixed in with your browns and your silvers and your oranges and whatnot. And I come back in with more silver over top of everything. I'm actually using the brighter color this time because the recently chipped off rust leaves behind a much brighter silver than the kind of silver that has rusted itself. And now we're going to apply the chipping fluid. I use a sponge to apply the chipping fluid. I find that the chipping fluid is going to pull paint up wherever it reactivates. And if you use a sponge, you will get a nice kind of variety of distribution of the chipping fluid. Now I'm coming in with purple and yellow for the paint colors for the vehicle. Now it's important to do as effective of a coating as possible for this because you can't do two coats when you have just put down the chipping medium. You're going to have to chip before you do a second coat of touch-ups and highlights and all that. So as a result, you want to do a very thorough job painting. Now I'm going to come in with the yellow. I'm using just the yellow that I had lying around for this, and making sure to put on a nice thick coat. It's not going to be as thorough or effective as the purple, of course, because yellow is a trickier color. And now it's important to let your paint fully cure before you come in and do your chipping. Okay, so we're going to come in with water on a brush, and I like to use either a cloth or a washcloth or a paper towel in order to kind of provide some of that abrasion and pick up some of the paint that's coming off. So I'm using a cotton swab to kind of get in and provide that abrasion, and then I'm kind of using the towel to pick up the paint that's coming off. And as you can see, the paint comes off in relation to where the chipping fluid went on. Because I applied the chipping fluid, in areas where I felt it would be likely that the vehicle would weather, it will come off stronger in those places. And as you can see, it does work. Now to better blend the paints themselves, I'm going to apply a layer of a black wash that I use on just about everything. Nuln oil works just fine for this, or Vallejo oil spill, but I happen to make this wash myself. I keep saying I'm going to show how I do that in an upcoming video, but I need to run out of the stuff that I have first. And now I'm going to come in while the wash is still wet with my weathering powder, my final weathering powder. This is a sand weathering powder because I go for kind of a pale white sand kind of color for most of my ash waste stuff, because that's the color scheme I went with initially. And now that I've got tons of stuff painted that way, it's important to stay consistent. But I have seen some really cool descriptions from the older version of the game about the ash waste that depict it as being far more colorful, and I'm kind of intrigued to maybe explore some of the kind of wackier color schemes possible down the road. And there you have it, an ash waste ready walker, weathered and brutal looking, ready to go, joining the rest of my motor pool. And of course, thank you to my patrons who help me keep this show running. You too can become a patron for as little as $2 a month. So check that out, patreon.com/domerunners. And of course, check out the podcast on Buzzsprout or on iTunes, Google Podcasts, etc. And of course, everybody stay safe, and don't forget to change your paint water.